Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to our Mindful Healers episode, Getting Help Helps. A reminder that this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. And at the time of the recording today, we're almost at 10,000 downloads. And perhaps by the time you are listening to this podcast, we've already exceeded 10,000 downloads. So we're so grateful to you, our dear listeners, for listening, for the kind words. And we would so appreciate you continuing to share our podcast and leave us stars and reviews. So thank you so much. The intention of today's podcast is to recognize that getting help is a strength, not a weakness.
We hope you will discover that getting help is an act of kindness for you and for others, and that you can go farther, faster with help, and that you can help others who need help more effectively when you get help yourself. So getting help is a strength and not a weakness. And self-sufficiency is not a measure of adequacy. And I wanted to call out that thought because so many of us think that when we get help, it reflects inadequacy rather than strength, and that we are not enough or we should be able to do it ourselves. And that when we don't get help and we do things on our own, when we could benefit from help, or even when we need help, that's actually kind of a form of sabotage or getting in our own way, and certainly doesn't help us show up as the best version of ourselves. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that we often avoid getting help from a place of shame and from a place of needing help. And reminding you all that we've talked about many times that shame gets us stuck in a place where we don't utilize the tools that are available to us, and we don't show up in the best way that we can for ourselves and others. And that shame causes us in our physical body to release norepinephrine and cortisol that helps us not think of solutions and not move forward in the most helpful and effective way.
I want to share a quote from a favorite book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackay. When have you been at your strongest? Asked the boy. When I have dared to show my weakness. So at this point, we're going to share some stories of where we've gotten help for ourselves and that it has helped. And when we have perhaps avoided getting the help that we needed.
So I will share that many years ago, when I was in a place where I really needed help, I hesitated for a long time to get the help that I needed. My brain would tell me that I didn't know what to do, or maybe it wouldn't help, or maybe I didn't need it, or maybe I could do it myself. And for me, it was really in reaching out for coaching. And so I had discovered coaching and had listened to a lot of podcasts about coaching, and even found a coach that I liked and wanted to work with. But my brain told me that I shouldn't need the help and that I could figure it out myself. And so because I'm stubborn, which I think many of you probably are too, I kept telling myself, I can do this by myself. I can figure it out myself. And then 6 months later, I would still be struggling to figure it out. And when I finally decided to get help, it made a huge difference and actually transformed my life completely. The other instance of getting help is more recent, and the pandemic has made it harder for me to exercise. And I kept telling myself that I would get to it or I'd do it myself, and telling myself that actually being kind to myself was maybe not doing it. And for me, walking is a form of exercise that I do pretty well, and yoga I do pretty well, but I wasn't doing any cardio or strength training or anything like that, which I know is good for me and makes me feel better. And so I actually finally got help and found someone to meet with to help me get started. And that sometimes we just need someone to help us get started. And that is literally a form of strength, as I'm now much stronger than I was a few weeks ago. And I find that I'm doing all these other things on my own. So it isn't just the time I spend with that person, but it was the way to sort of leapfrog or push myself to start doing some things that I really wanted to be doing, but for whatever reason was getting in my own way. And then the last form of help was to get some help with cleaning. And for many of us, again, we think there's strength in doing it ourselves. And in my mind, I thought I could do it myself. I should do it myself. And what if sometimes it's just nicer not to do it yourself? And that it can be okay to do something that's kind for you and potentially kind for someone else who also needs the income and support. And that getting help for yourself can help you and can help others.
For me, the first time that I reached out for help was when I was coming out of cancer treatment, recognizing that I had already gotten so much help from the allopathic and integrative side of things for the physical treatment of cancer. I realized that I was left after acute treatment with this overwhelming sense of sadness at what I had just gone through, that I was so busy getting chemotherapy, getting surgery, waiting for the next step in treatment, that I hadn't given myself time to process what I had just gone through. And then left with that at the end of treatment, being declared that at that time I was cancer free, and knock on wood, I still remain cancer free. I realized that I had already healed a lot of my physical scars, but internally, I still had a lot of healing to do, especially with facing the fact that there would be a lifetime of uncertainty, particularly as a cancer survivor, kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I remember speaking to a physician mentor about getting therapy and counseling to work through some of this. And looking back at that time, it was like I was asking for permission, when in actuality, more than 10 years later, the only person that I needed to get permission from to get help was myself. But then I invite all of you to take it even one step further, that you never need permission to get help for yourself. And sometimes when you might be reluctant to grant yourself permission to get help for a variety of reasons, because of the judgment and the shame that you had mentioned, Jessie, the fear, even the professional repercussions, you can bring in mindfulness, where you can witness all of this and hold all of these sentiments just as they are, but get help anyway. I also want to take a little bit of time just right now to acknowledge that we're in the time of a pandemic where there is uncertainty, perhaps more uncertainty than we've ever faced in this day and age as a human race. And that for many, there are heightened levels of stress and anxiety, myself included. And sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. And so this is an opportune time to get help. Not getting help would actually be unkind for yourself.
I just wanted to add this idea of responsibility, because it's something that pops up a lot in my coaching of physicians about what's responsible and what's not. And when you were talking about the heightened levels of stress, perhaps it's responsible to get help. And sometimes we can use our underlying traits that may get us into trouble to also help us. And so permission might be what you need to do. Letting go of shame might be what you need to do. Being willing to, invest in yourself or be kind to yourself or give yourself a gift might be what you need to say to get yourself to do it. Or maybe you just need to decide it's responsible to get help. And maybe it doesn't matter what the thought process it is, as long as it gets you to where you need help and get the help. And I like to also think about how you can go farther faster with help. And maybe the goal isn't to go farther or to go faster. Maybe it's just to be kind, but it is a way that you can help yourself do things that you might not otherwise be able to do. And so as a yoga teacher, one of the things that helps people go farther and faster is using yoga bolsters and props. And I wanted to bring this up because I think some people are very hesitant to use the props and they feel like they're a crutch. And yet when you use blocks, for example, to do pyramid pose, which is a hamstring stretch, which for many is very, very difficult, you actually are able to start stretching. And when you don't use the blocks, you can't. The other thing that's interesting, so some people resist using the blocks at all. Some people have no resistance to using the blocks, and it's okay to get help or to use a block or a bolster in yoga, but it wouldn't be okay to do something that would be the equivalent of a block or a bolster in the rest of your life. And so just noticing where your brain may get in your way of getting help. The other analogy that I wanted to bring up about going farther faster, as many of you know, I have a love of pelicans, and pelicans help one another. And so they fly in a chevron where there's one pelican that leads the V of the chevron, and that person does most of the work and helps all of the other people in the chevron. He helps the whole flock of pelicans, I think they're called, go farther faster. But when that person gets tired, he or she, the pelican pops to the back of the V, and someone else takes the lead and helps others. So that we can sometimes be of help, and we also can take turns getting help and being of help. And that when we do that, the whole flock goes farther, faster. And so thinking about it in that way really helps me get past some of these ideas of shame and permission and the challenges that may get in our way when we think about getting help. And as physicians and as healers and pretty much all high achievers, I think we struggle with allowing ourselves to get help. And so thoughts that have gotten in my way, and we've shared a few of those, but I think it's worth calling out and sharing our thoughts that get in our way to help you see some of the ones that may get in your way of getting help. So one for me is I should be able to do it myself, which I've brought up a couple of times. The other one is hard work is better. If it's hard, it's better and that struggle is necessary for success. And so that getting help would mean that maybe it wouldn't be as of value. And I like to think that these thoughts that I should be able to do it myself, that hard work is better, and that struggle is necessary for success, they're old habits, and that maybe they are not needed anymore and they're not serving me.
It seems like between the combination of many of our upbringing and also feeding more even into that, the culture of medicine, I really resonated a lot with what you said about this should be able to do it for ourselves. Busyness and the absence of rest has somehow become this badge of honor, when in actuality it's quite self-destructive. When busyness and lack of rest and help can eventually prevent you from continuing to be busy and can prevent you from continuing to be of help to others. So the thought, I can get through this. I've overcome more challenging circumstances before. so I can definitely get through this. So this thought pattern has been for me when I try to rationalize my way from getting help. It's been based upon prior behavioral history, that this adversity that I've already overcome in the past, and it might have been years or decades ago, is somehow predictive and proof to myself that I don't need help. But I challenge that mindset now because biologically, we are older. And yes, we've gained the wisdom of life with each passing moment. At the same time, though, our bodies are also aging. And this is a fact and a reality, and this does not stop. So sometimes, like now, when the circumstance of the world, much of which is out of our control, creating an even greater sense of instability and chaos for many, myself included, why should we expect ourselves to be able to muster through it on our own? And I also bring up the inner critic because perhaps the inner critic has been exceedingly hard on you. I know my inner critic has for me. Perhaps it's been a lifelong pattern. And maybe our inner critic has been there to motivate us, to help us strive and achieve, especially in us as physicians and healers. And perhaps the inner critic has been ever present, seemingly in a good proportion of our lives. But when we're struggling, maybe perhaps recognizing that some of us might be struggling more as of late, does that inner critic really serve us? So I want to mention right now Kristen Neff and Chris Germer's work of mindful self-compassion. How would you talk to or treat a friend or a loved one in a similar circumstance? And then another exercise that they led during the recent Mindful Self-Compassion Core workshop that I just recently attended is imagining yourself as a newborn, perhaps conjuring up or looking at an old picture of yourself as a newborn. Because that cute, small, helpless infant was you. And so how would you treat or talk to you as that helpless infant? And sometimes that perspective shift can help us become kinder to ourselves.
So one of the primary intentions of this episode is to normalize getting help. And I like to call out that professional athletes, people who are revered in our society, all get help. They have lots of helpers, trainers, mindset people, all the people, nutritionists, all the things that can help them perform at a higher level. And yet physicians in particular often don't have any of that help or support. And yet we perform at a level, particularly I think of people like surgeons, where life and death is what's the game rather than winning or losing. And that perhaps when you're in surgery, the surgery lasts much longer than a game. And the training is much longer and the career is much longer. And so why do we think of getting help as a weakness rather than as just normal for someone who's trying to perform at such a high level throughout their life? And so what if help was a performance tool? And what if help is part of your responsibility and to help yourself so you can help others? And perhaps getting help, whatever the help might look like, is a way to help the team of either people that you work with or the team being all of humanity. And that help can see things that we don't see ourselves. And so allowing ourselves to get help and doing something uncomfortable like getting help is actually tremendously beneficial. I think for us to take the step to get help, we have to believe that the help will help. And we have to believe that feeling better is possible. And we have to believe that we are adequate and worthy of getting help. And so realizing that some of the initial work to be able to get help and to feel like it's normal and responsible and beneficial is to allow yourself to be uncomfortable doing so. If you're uncomfortable doing so, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, it likely means you should do it. And realizing that there's discomfort in getting the help, but there's also a lot of discomfort in not getting the help that you need or want.
Mindfulness is a form of help. It helps you be the help as well. I want to conjure up, and perhaps for those of you who have taken mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindful self-compassion, the diagram of the circles of safety. So there are 3 concentric circles. The one in the middle is your zone of safety. The one outside of that is your zone of challenge or discomfort. And then the larger circle outside of that is your zone of overwhelm. And so using the zones of safety, the circles of safety, as a tool for mindfulness to recognize when you are in each zone, and that when you are in a zone of overwhelm, perhaps more often than not, that can be a way for you to recognize when help is needed. Also, there are a couple of different mindfulness acronyms that you can use in the moment, one of which I'll share in the mindful moment. But for instance, the STOP acronym, where you stop, S is for stop, T is for take a breath, O is to observe, so naming the thoughts, emotions, and body sensations that you're having in that moment of difficulty, and then P to then proceed with greater skillful action. That is an acronym of mindfulness that you can take with you that might enable you to recognize that you do need help. It's also an opportunity for curiosity about if you need help, how you're going to get it, and what you will get help with. Another aspect in mindfulness, namely mindful self-compassion, is something called the mindful self-compassion break. In the show notes, I will include some links to guided meditations from the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion for the self-compassion break. But in the moment of difficulty, this break enables us to provide some self-compassion that is oftentimes needed in moments of difficulty. So the first step is to recognize that difficulty is present, which is the moment of mindfulness. The second step is to acknowledge that of the billions of people in the world, there are others just like you going through something very similar, reminding you that you're not alone in this difficulty. And then the last step is to ask yourself what it is that you need in this moment, an opportunity to nurture yourself, perhaps with some loving touch with hands over heart, or the gentle stroking of your arms, invoking our mammalian nurturing brains to kick online for ourselves. I'm going to pause right now for another Charlie Mackasy quote. What is the bravest thing you have ever said? Help, said the horse.
So yoga is a form of help. Many people see it as a form of exercise, but it is also a form of help for your depleted nervous system. Coaching is also a form of help. A guide is a help. It helps you see things that you can't see on your own and provide some accountability for how you want to move forward and a vision of what you will do next.
Community is also a form of help. Peers, colleagues, loved ones can all offer help. So I'll take this as an opportunity, if you're a healer in healthcare, to please join us at the Mindful Healthcare Collective Facebook group or to sign up at mindfulhealthcarecollective.com. And as always, we like to close our podcast with some reflection questions for you, dear listener. Where do you ask for help easily?
When has help helped you?
What keeps you from getting help when you need it?
What if you wanted help rather than needed help? A final Charlie Mackasy quote about help. Asking for help isn't giving up, said the horse. It's refusing to give up. Thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with others who might be helped by listening. Our mission is to offer help to healers in the form of mindfulness coaching and sharing our experience and own struggles. We would be most grateful if you could please help us by leaving us some stars and reviews.
Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. Thanks for listening.
As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or uplevel your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely. Welcome to this mindful moment. This acronym is called the BAT acronym. It's one that I developed around the start of the COVID pandemic. And perhaps it's helpful to remember that it's thought that the virus originated potentially from bats originally. So perhaps that's a way for you to remember this acronym a bit easier. So I offer this acronym in a moment of difficulty that you might use it when you're noticing struggle, discomfort, stress, and anxiety. So if you are in a location that's safe to do so, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you. Just resting your attention on your physical body in this moment. Whether you're sitting or standing. So B is to breathe. Recognizing that we have our breath that can become our anchors of attention at any moment in time to bring us back to this present moment. A is to attend. As attending physicians, we're oftentimes attending to the needs of others. This is an opportunity for us to attend to ourselves, bringing in curiosity and kindness, attending to the emotions, giving ourselves permission to feel the felt sense of emotions in our body. Naming them enables us to claim them and tame them. Naming the body is sensations associated with the emotions. And then attending to our thoughts, not getting caught up in the storyline of the thoughts, but inviting a more curious gaze upon our thoughts, like clouds passing through the sky or leaves drifting down a stream. Reminding ourselves that thoughts are nothing more than brief chemical reactions that are happening in our brains that come and go, that might not be true, and that you might not have to believe. And then T is to then transition to a healthier response for this moment of difficulty, a response that might serve you, a response that's kinder for you. And whenever you're ready, inviting you to blink open eyes, letting the light back in, checking in with how you feel now compared to just a few minutes ago. Hoping that this BAT acronym you can take with you wherever you are for you to use in moments of struggle or difficulty. Thank you.